fifth team, Charlotte Hornets. Last season, 27 games or 27 wins. Over under this year is 31.5. By the way, all these over unders from BetMGM, and I just looked them up to double check it, so they should be accurate. So 31.5 over under means that the Hornets would need to win 42 games plus 15 on last season. Now, the main argument for the Hornets, depending on what happens, which we'll get to that in a second, but the starting lineup that was assumed to be the starting lineup is basically the same starting lineup that led them to 43 wins 2 seasons ago. The only difference is replacing Mason Plumlee with Mark Williams, which seems like a good swap. You know, Mark Williams has been pretty impressive through his rookie season. You don't have to do a ton of projection in the way you do with these other teams. You know, this group of guys, when healthy, have won this amount of games previously. We've seen them do it already. Another argument for the Hornets is that LaMelo Ball only played 36 games last season. And the last time we saw him play a full season, he was a 20-year-old all-star. So now we're talking about a guy in I'm assuming he's 22 years old. He's already very good. It makes sense that he would continue to get better as he ages through his 20s. So LaMelo coming back, if he's playing a full season, that's likely going to be a very good player leading this team. Arguments against the Hornets. I mentioned that they won 43 games 2 seasons ago, the 21-22 season.
Yep.
The main argument against would be this isn't 2 seasons ago. Things were different 2 seasons ago. There were a lot more obvious tanking teams across the league 2 seasons ago. In the East specifically, I mean, right out of the gate, you had Detroit and Orlando, who you know from game 1 were tanking. And then Indiana quickly became a tanking team. I think they ended up with 25 games. All of those teams won 25 games or fewer. In the East this year, Washington appears to be the only team that maybe isn't super motivated to win, although we just, made the case for them that they have all these vets. Maybe they'll be better than expected. I don't feel like there is an obvious couple of teams that are going to be, in the 20 to 25 range. And that goes for across the league, really. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but the over-unders this year are super high. There is one team with an over-under below 28.5. So, yes, they won 43 games, but it was a different league. It was a different conference. Other thing is, as bad as their health was last year, it was extremely good 2 years ago. All of Kelly Oubre, LaMelo, Rozier, Plumlee, Cody Martin, Bridges played at least 71 games. Now, Gordon Hayward only played 50 that year, but he hasn't played more than 52 games in 4 consecutive seasons. So that's kind of the expectation for Gordon. They'll likely be healthier this season, but will they be as healthy as 2 years ago? Now, the other argument against the Hornets, and this is, depending on your opinion, this could be just based on off-court stuff, or it could influence the on-court stuff, which is basically how this franchise has handled their off-court issues going back to last year with Miles Bridges, the domestic violence charges that he got last summer, new charges that were just a couple weeks ago. He, by all appearances, is still working out with the team. So this leads to a scenario where it's like, okay, either he's going to play somehow, and I have to make a decision whether I even want to root for this franchise, which, by the way, go check out, I believe his name's James Dater. He is an Australian, I think. I remember from the article.
And that's right.
He wrote an article for SB Nation this week about his reasoning behind why he's decided to stop following the Hornets, who have been his favorite team since the mid-90s, largely surrounding everything that has gone on with how they've handled the Miles Bridges situation going back to last summer. I think that's a perfectly reasonable take for him to make. And I think when you're looking at a team as a surprise team, it's got to be a team you want to root for throughout the whole season. So if you wouldn't want to pick the Hornets for that reason alone, I think it's perfectly understandable. The flip side of that is if he doesn't play, which I think for some Charlotte Hornets fans, they would love to just be done with Miles Bridges, just to never see him on their team again. Well, in that case, the team's probably getting worse. Like now you're asking a lot of Brandon Miller, who's a rookie, to come in and immediately be a winning player. So I think either way you're looking at it, it could influence your interest in picking Charlotte as your surprise team.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't pick them for a lot of reasons. I just don't think they're going to be very good. Two, the way they handled the Kai Jones situation in
I didn't even
comparison
mention that, just because
to the Bridges situation is absurd to me, and it shows like how shameless they are about these situations. Like Kai Jones what was he doing? Like, was he a nuisance to them? Yes. Did he get into legal trouble like Miles Bridges? No.
Not that we know of. No.
Not that we're aware of, and maybe he did, but not that we're aware of. But because of the nuisance he was, and because he wasn't very good, they were willing to cut ties with him. Also, right. None of this would matter at all if they hadn't whiffed on so many draft picks. Like if they didn't whiff on James Bouknight, JT Thor, there's just been too many times that they have whiffed on first round draft picks that have made this matter even more. It's put more pressure on them to have to try to keep Miles Bridges because they haven't been able to draft anybody. Like they have set this up for themselves. And like morally, I think what they've done is wrong to keep this guy around. There should be and some of this should be the league should be able to step in and say like, no, like Miles Bridges, like your whole situation is frozen until everything is settled, until we figure this out. And if you're the Hornets, why would you want that stink on you? Like we don't have to keep going on, but to me, I'm just ready to kind of boycott the Hornets as well and like just kind of be done with them.
And last thing I'll say is the nicest thing I could say about the Hornets is that I don't think this is a Hornets specific issue. Like you mentioned, I think this is a league wide issue.
Yeah.
I don't have confidence that any team in this position wouldn't have made the same decisions they did because Miles Bridges is seen as a good player, scored, 20 plus points per game the last time we saw him. I think when these are bad players, players at the end of a roster, it's very easy for teams to just cut ties and feel like they've done the noble thing. I think we really see what these teams are thinking when it comes to a player that actually matters to the win-loss column, where they will bend over backwards to continue associating themselves with these players. And that is not just the Hornets. That has been a league-wide thing going back many, many years.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on.
Hey, but shout out to the Hornets for signing RJ Hunter, bringing him back into the NBA.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I remember really liking RJ Hunter during that draft.
I did too.
That was the draft when the Celtics took Rozier at like 16 and Hunter at like 29 or whatever. And everyone was like, wow, I don't mind the picks, but I think they should have been flipped. RJ Hunter should have been at 16.
And now they find themselves back on a different roster with a different team.